Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for episode 4 of Dark Fun in the Dark Sun, also known as the one where we kind of ruin everything. But I mean seriously, we were kind of meant to ruin everything and you'll see as we get into it. So for this session we lucked into a full table again. I think everyone was just really excited about this campaign, and so we had Halvar, Lord Jackhammer, Kadan, Raylan, Little Jenny, and Eighth Wonder. If you remember, at the end of the last session, Little Jenny and her friend Urgos got thrown out into the streets of Tyr and bestowed the title of noble upon them. By looking at the daggers that they acquired, because they got the noble's equipment, they saw that it said Sten. So they went to the nearest pub and they asked the barkeep if he knew where House Sten was, and he pointed them in the direction. And so they went out to the farmlands just outside of Tyr to, I guess, claim their house. So the person who normally plays Kadan was playing Urgos for the purposes of this. And they start to learn a bit more about their heritage. The farm belonged to two brothers, Regal and Ismar, and they still had a family out on the farm. So they went out to, you know, claim what was their own, I guess. And when they got out there, as you can imagine, things didn't go super well. First of all, when they walked up to the farm, they saw that there was an elf slave on the porch speaking to another noble looking person. His name was Aegis of Astocles, and he was a neighbor. Basically, he came to talk to Regal and Ismar about the state of starvation happening in the city of Tyr. And so he was a little surprised when this half-giant and this halfling show up, and the half-giant goes, "I, Regal." And the halfling goes, "I guess I'm Ismar." So he kind of leaves, like, okay, if you need anything, I guess I'm next door. And the two new nobles go into their new house. Well, turns out that Regal has a family. He has a wife and a 19-year-old son. And he goes, "I father now, I husband." And as you might imagine, they're really confused. They finally understand what's going on. Little Jenny tries to steal Regal's wife and it doesn't go so well, so she just goes into the kitchen to eat all the food. And Regal, or Urgos, depending on who you ask, tries to make amends with his new family. The wife is not taking this very well, and so Little Jenny puts her to sleep and they kind of put her to the side room. And the son, Henron, goes, "Well, if my father's dead, then I now inherit this farm. I'm the master here." And he tries to stab Regal. And Regal goes, "Son, you hurt father." And so they had to knock him out and put him up in his room and lock the door. Next, we roll back into the pits where the remaining characters are. Because we've lost quite a few people on our team, Halvar suggests that we have a job fair to see if anyone wants to come join us. Lord Jackhammer's roommate Argos agrees to give us one of his people. Another overseer, Casmet, says, "I'll give you 2 of my people, but when the new slaves come in tomorrow, you don't get any of them." And then Lord Jackhammer decides, "Well, you might give me crappy slaves, I'll just take the new ones from tomorrow." At dinner time, Melinda comes over, as she always does, and talks with us. She says she knows Raylan has been working with the Veiled Alliance and Faldar to pass messages, and so she will help facilitate it so that Raylan and Doug can get out of the pits at night. Which is awesome, because it means that now I have some sort of freedom. I can go out and wander the streets of Tyr at night, which doesn't at all seem like a bad idea. Then at dinner, Grange, who was kind of like forming that rebel alliance, comes up, sees that Little Jenny's gone, but turns his attention to Halvar because Halvar was like, "I don't want to be here anymore, this is really boring." He basically wants to see if Halvar wants to attend this meeting and wants him to represent our crew. And also, you know, wants to know if there's anybody else that he should talk to in our group. Halvar specifically says, "Don't talk to any of my brothers," because they're idiots and they will accidentally let this plan go. But he does agree to go take part in this vote. That night, Raylan and Doug sneak out and they head their way to the first pub to see if they've heard anything about their friends. After we asked about the weird appearance of 2 nobles, the bartender was able to direct us to the House of Sten. I asked Doug, who's pretty familiar with Tyr, if he knew where it was, and he did, so we headed out that way, where I got to meet back up with my friends. And Little Jenny and Regal kindly offer us a bunch of food, which is great, because living in the slave pit sucks. And so we ate a bunch of food, and I took some extra food back for our friends just in case, because you never know. Meanwhile, Henron has managed to escape from his room, and he comes back down and he tries to stab Regal again. And Regal just continuously acts very hurt. "Son hurt father," all that fun stuff. And like, we were in stitches at the table. Regal is like the funniest character ever. Regal ends up having to knock out his son again, locks him up in his room, and then we find out that the wife has gone out the yard and in her grief, not being able to deal with the loss of her husband, or, you know, her new husband, the half-giant, has offed herself. At that point, Aegis comes over. He sees that there's more friends here and he wants to talk to us. But first things first, Regal asks him the important question of how to deal with his son. He doesn't really get far with that, but we do realize that Aegis is kind of on the same team as us. He was good friends with Tithian when they were growing up. They kind of diverged paths, but he thinks that Tithian will be amenable to the rebellion if we can present a good enough argument. After that, we head back to the pit for the night, and in the morning, Kadan goes to the gladiator pit. He spars with Rickus, and they start to come up with a plan of how to get Rickus out of the gladiator pit in order to attend the meeting that's coming up. Also, Lord Jackhammer gets called to the Templar tent again because Tithian wants to know if he knows anything about the Veiled Alliance or anything that's going on. Lord Jackhammer says he doesn't, and Tithian says he's disappointed in him, and he says we must double the quota the next day or Lord Jackhammer will be dead. And Lord Jackhammer kind of takes everything seriously, and so he thinks that that means that if he doesn't double the quota, he's just suddenly gonna die. He doesn't understand it's a threat. So he comes back, he's very upset, and he tells us what happened. And so he goes about trying to take everybody's people. If he needs to save himself, he will do whatever he can to get a huge crew for the next day. So basically the other overseers aren't interested in giving him any of their slaves. So instead, Lord Jackhammer decides to seize some more means of production and just beat up these overseers and take control of their teams. He manages to do that. He takes down a Thri-Kreen and he takes down a dwarf, and suddenly he is overseeing 4 different crews. But he was like, don't worry guys, you can be my underseers. Once that's taken care of, he does a shuffling of all the slaves, and then we end up with a half-giant, a Maul, and a human to help us haul water and mix the mud together. We do have to work an extra shift that night, but we do manage to hit the quota, and so Lord Jackhammer was saved. Back at House Sten, it turns out that Henron's still not enjoying his new father, and he has disappeared out the window. Regal is very upset about this, and it becomes his new mission to find his son. Meanwhile, little Jenny went around the house exploring, and she found a chest with 500 ceramic pieces in it, and she decides to free the slaves because she sees how well it was working for Aegis next door, and hires them back on as paid workers. Not getting paid a lot, but at least they're getting paid. Then she and Regal set out to find this map that little Jenny had hidden out in the Tablelands before she got captured. And Regal goes because he's like, will map show son? And little Jenny says no, but hey, maybe we can find him on our way out. Today is the day of the meeting, and so Kadan needs to figure out a way to cause a distraction so Rickus can get out and get to the meeting. Well, there's no better way to do that than to release a giant stag beetle and let him trample things. Unfortunately, he tried to divert it towards where the guards were and it wasn't working, so he had to come up with a new plan. Because he is a cleric of the grave domain, which is kind of like a subsection of Earth, he can phase through Earth. So he got naked, put his loincloth around his head, and phased through the guard shack, and when they freaked out about it, Rickus was able to get away. Like I said, back in the pit, we were working hard to hit the quota so Lord Jackhammer wouldn't get killed, and everything went well other than having to work that extra shift. At this point, little Jenny and Regal make their way out into the Tablelands, where they find an old man with a divination rod looking for something in the sand near where the map is. Little Jenny asks Regal to distract him. Unfortunately, Regal's not the smartest person, and the old man's like, well, can you help me find this thing? And so he starts to help him. And if you're not sure who this is Nebuchadnezzar. He's a druid that we met in the last campaign, and he has one half of this map, and now he needs this one, and he believes that it leads to a portal to the moon. They do some negotiating. They want something from him in order to give him the map. Little Jenny asks for his scimitar, and Regal asks for him to help him find his son, but Nebuchadnezzar doesn't want to help find his son, so they just agree on the scimitar and also that they get to see the map. And the riddle on the map goes like this. It sleeps for years and suddenly wakes. It shifts in bed, its body shakes. Its blood flows red, then turns to black. It sleeps again, but may come back. Now, somebody pointed out in one of the Welcome to the Dark Some videos, it's probably a volcano, and my DM was like, yeah, of course, you already know what it is, but hey, yeah. Back in the pit, Grange calls Halvar over and says, hey, do you want to come to this meeting, and do you want to bring anyone? And he decides that bringing Lord Jackhammer is a stupid idea, but bringing Eighth Wonder maybe isn't so bad. So those two large Sun brothers go over to the meeting. Meanwhile, I escape out of the pits again, and I'm heading to the other meeting on the outside of the pits in the city of Tyr. There are a lot of people there. I'm there with Doug. There's people from the Veiled Alliance, Asenath and Neith. There's the female blacksmith Nabo, there's Aegis, Laud the Noble, Little Jenny and Regal are there as well. Rickus and Neva make it in from the gladiator pits. And then last but not least is Tithian, the head of the Templar. While Tithian can agree that Calic has gone too far, he doesn't know the best way to deal with this. There's lots of rumors going around, especially about the ziggurat, and Asenath says that Calic is going to use the ziggurat to become a dragon, and that the only way to stop him is to go get the heartwood spear that Nock has made on the edge of the forest belt. Rickus says he will go, Little Jenny says she will come, and Regal says he will also accompany them because he is looking for his son. And so the proposal made by the rest of the assembled group was that we would take down Calic and install Tithian as king, on the condition that he abolish slavery and help find Regal's son. And Tithian agrees, because who wouldn't want to be king? Meanwhile, at the meeting in the pit, there's a couple different factions trying to figure out what to do. There's some dwarves that want to escape tonight because they absolutely hate it. There's Grange and his faction, and they think that rash action is stupid, it will get you killed, and we need to think this through. There's some Mull who think that escape is helpless and that they might as well take down some Templar and die in valor. And then there's the half-elves who just are all for one and one for all. Somehow, despite the fact that they aren't very charismatic, Halvar and Aeth managed to sway the vote in their favor, accidentally become the new leaders of this rebellion, and managed to push for patience and planning. Meanwhile, Rickus, Regal, and Little Jenny have taken off that night on some stolen chariots, and they are headed for the forest belt. Then in the morning, an announcement is made in the slave pit that the ziggurat will be finished in 2 days, and that then there will be a huge competition and celebration to commemorate this moment. Because Raylan and Doug were at the meeting, they know that we need as much time as possible, and so we convinced Lord Jackhammer that we've worked hard and that we need a day off. And considering he holds sway over a huge group of slaves, we do manage to slow the production down a little bit. Not a ton, but a little bit. When Rickus, Regal, and Little Jenny get to the forest edge and they get all the way up and they meet Little Jenny's brother Nock, Regal approaches him and says, "Have you seen my nephew?" Because Little Jenny's family. And if Little Jenny's family, then Nock is family. And Nock is considerably confused, but he does have the spear, which he gives to Rickus and wishes them the best. Then they jump back on the chariot and race back to Tyr because they know they don't have a lot of time. The night before the competition, the Templars say that everyone gets a feast, like double rations, as a thank you for their service. And Lord Jackhammer calls for a moment of silence for Phoebus. And the food is amazing. And that night, everybody goes to sleep, excited, or maybe a little bit pessimistic, that tomorrow we're going to the gladiator games. Raylan and Doug sneak out that night and they go to the House of Sten because they feel like something's not right. In the morning, Rickus returns with the spear and he gives it to Kadan because he is exhausted from traveling non-stop for like 2 to 3 whole days. Regal and Little Jenny have a box because they're nobles, and Raylan and Doug sit just beside them in the box with Aegis and Sidira. When Little Jenny sees her friends up in the slave area, she goes up there and she says hi to them, sees how they're doing. They ask if they can come down, but the guards won't let them, but that's fine. We'll all see each other afterwards. When Calic comes out, Sidira mentions that there's likely a magical barrier around him, but she says that at the appointed moment, she will dispel magic and I will call down lightning so we can distract him, giving Kadan the best chance possible to hit him with the spear. Next, the gladiators come out, and when Calic sees the spear coming towards him from Kadan's hand, he thinks nothing of it because he knows he has this magical barrier up. Except Sidira pulled it down, and then he got hit by lightning, and then he got stabbed with the spear. And then things just start to go crazy. Some people are pursuing Calic, but he's got a couple guards in front of him, 2 half-giants and a Templar. And then Halvar and Aeth get a group of people around them and they start to mob, trying to get people out of here. Kadan is doing the same down on the floor. He's trying to rally people to get to the doors to get people out of here. Aeth manages to open up a dimension door and drops himself and Lord Jackhammer right by Calic, whose guards then throw him inside the ziggurat to turn and face these 2 half-giants. The battle's going a little crazy and everybody is either, like I said, making their way to Calic or making their way to try to clear the stadium. And then suddenly in the midst of this chaos, these tendrils start to come out of the top of the ziggurat and old men and women start dropping like flies. Kadan's trying to get the doors open and Raylan is trying to collapse the top of the ziggurat to stop these tendrils from snaking out. Meanwhile, Havlar and Kadan have both amassed a huge mob of people. Kadan's being rather productive and trying to get out with them. Meanwhile, Halvar is kind of moving around and just going, kill that one, now kill that one. And he's making his way up to the entrance to the ziggurat as well. Well, we have this thing where whenever we come across half-giants in this campaign, we roll to see if they are Largeson brothers. In order for that to happen, you have to get 100 on a D100. So for the first half-giant, we roll, it's like a 98 or something, so like super close. For the second half-giant, we roll, and it's 100. It turns out that one of these half-giants is Kill Big Largeson, one of their brothers. And so when they realize that, they stop fighting him and he starts fighting with us. Unfortunately, the other half-giant was still on Calic's side. He's not a Largeson brother. So he went and blocked the hallway, and like the Templar, I think, got thrown off the top days there. Like, he was gone. So then you've got like 4 half-giants trying to get through this very narrow hallway, and eventually Eighth Wonder was able to use his calm emotion on this other half-giant, who was like, I guess you can go past. Nobody else really got past, but at least they got through. Meanwhile, in the other parts of the arena, Halvar is continuing to take out Templar, and Kadan has managed to get a door open just enough that people are starting to get out. And then up on the top of the ziggurat, Raylan is calling down every spell she has, Call Lightning, Erupting Earth, all that kind of stuff, to try to cave in the top. Our friends weren't the only one who got past that half-giant though, because Tithian had come in from somewhere else in the ziggurat. And so little Jenny gets to the room that Calic is in, and the room is lined with 6 orbs on pedestals that the tendrils are feeding into. He's eaten one, and he's turning to eat the other one when little Jenny comes in and destroys a few of them. At this point, with one of the orbs destroyed, there's no way that Calic can ascend to dragonhood, but he's not going to go down without a fight. So Tithian's still unsure of what to do, but Lord Jackhammer, in his managerial position with his tie, knows that sometimes you delegate and sometimes you don't. And so he steps in with an axe that he had taken off the other half-giant and just goes to town on Calic and severs his head. Just to make sure everything's good, Tithian steps in at that point and stabs the Heartwood Spear, which he had picked up, into Calic's head. He then climbs his way to the top of the ziggurat, holds up the head, and declares that the city of Tyr is free and slavery is abolished. And somewhere in the distance, over the din, you can hear an annoyed druid named Bardock yell, "What the?" Alrighty, so that is the end of our Freedom campaign. I know it only took like 4 episodes, but we were having such a great time and we just wouldn't stop playing and just wanted to progress the story as much as we could because it was just so much fun, especially with all those Largesons. Next week, we will be starting on the road to Uric, so make sure you tune in for that because it should prove to be just as interesting. We're actually going to be doing character trees, so we will have our characters from Welcome to the Dark Sun, as well as our characters from the Freedom campaign, which means that there will be more Largeson action, and we're going to roll up another character. So we finally shifted into the character tree for Dark Sun, which I think is something that's suggested, but it's great because we've grown ours very organically through the course of our campaigns. So with that, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe so you'll know when the next episode comes out, and I will see you next time. That night, after they described a halfling and a half-giant that were now nobles. Nope, try again. Next, Lord Jam